Today is February 1st. It's the 32nd day of the year, and this is the On This Day podcast. And this week, we're going to be doing some reprise episodes. As I mentioned yesterday, if you've been listening since the very, very first day I started doing this show, first of all, thank you very much. That's fantastic. And second of all, some of this may sound a little familiar to you. And if you join the show later on in the run, this will all be new content to you. Either way, I hope you enjoyed today's show. On this day in 1968, combat photographer Eddie Adams is on a street in Saigon when he sees a commotion to his left. He turns in time to see a handcuffed man wearing a plaid shirt and shorts, surrounded by South Vietnamese National Police. Adams sees the chief of police raising his pistol to the man's head. As General Win Lone pulls the trigger, Adams snaps his shutter. Adams then drops his film off at the AP office and thinks nothing more of it. It's war, and this is the kind of thing he sees every day. The victim, the leader of a Viet Cong revenge squad, who earlier in the day had murdered dozens of unarmed civilians, including family members of the police, is an illegal combatant according to the Geneva Convention, and as such is subject to summary execution. But when published, the picture has a profound impact on American sentiment about the war in Vietnam, and on General Lone, who instantly becomes the face of villainy in an already unpopular war. He will be vilified for the rest of his life. After the war, General Lone emigrates to America. He opens a pizza parlor in Burke, Virginia, Les Trois Continents, and tries to live a life of anonymity. But he is recognized and forced to retire early, passing away in 1998 in Virginia. For his part, photographer Eddie Adams feels so bad for damaging the honorable reputation of a man he can sympathize with that he apologizes to the general. General Lone tells him, "You were doing your job and I was doing my job." Eddie Adams earns the Pulitzer Prize for his photograph, the photograph he wished had never been published. Of the Pulitzer Prize-winning photograph Eddie Adams takes on this day in 1968, he later writes, quote, "Two people died in that photograph. The general killed the Viet Cong, and I killed the general with my camera." On this day in 2003, the Space Shuttle Columbia returns to Earth. Columbia is the first shuttle to reach orbit in the early days of the Shuttle program, making the program's maiden flight in April of 1981. On this, its 27th mission, STS-107, Columbia has traveled 6.6 million miles. On board are Commander Rick Husband, pilot William McCool, mission specialists Michael Anderson, David Brown, Kalpana Chawla, and Laurel Clark, and payload specialist Ilan Ramon. It's been 15 days and 22 hours since a seemingly smooth and uneventful liftoff. However, a day after liftoff, when high-resolution film of the launch is processed and reviewed, it's discovered that 82 seconds after liftoff, a piece of foam attached to the external fuel tank breaks off and strikes the orbiter's left wing, leaving a hole in the wing's leading edge, the RCC, the reinforced carbon-carbon heat shield panel. Similar debris strikes from ice and foam have occurred before, and NASA managers reviewing the footage determined that there's no concern for re-entry. Unbeknownst to anyone at the time, once in orbit, a piece of the RCC about the size of a laptop computer, later referred to as the Day 2 object, dislodges and drifts away from the shuttle, leaving the wing vulnerable to the excessively hot gases the vehicle will pass through upon re-entry. After a successful 15-day mission, the shuttle begins its return to Earth. As the shuttle descends, it's traveling at speeds so fast it covers the distance between Utah and Texas in 3 minutes. The wing leading edge temperatures normally reach almost 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. At 8:58 a.m., a thermal protection tile breaks off, falling to the ground and landing in a field in Littlefield, Texas. At 8:59 a.m. and 15 seconds, landing gear tire pressure monitors stop working. This is of great concern. Columbia is a heavyweight mission, a fully loaded payload. As such, a wheels-up landing would not be survivable, and the crew would have to bail out using an escape pole system that's never been tried before. But the reality is far worse. At 8:59 a.m. and 32 seconds, a broken transmission from Mission Commander Rick Husband is received. It's the final transmission from the crew. At 8:59 and 37 seconds, hydraulic pressure monitors stop working. By 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on this day in 2003, all communication with Columbia is lost, and witnesses on the ground begin to see streaks in the Texas sky as the Space Shuttle Columbia disintegrates. For several minutes, astronaut Charlie Hobaugh, sitting in mission control in Houston, Texas, calls out to the crew,
Columbia, Houston, UHF comm check.
But there's only static. At 9:05 a.m., Flight Director Leroy Kane contacts Kennedy Space Center, where the shuttle is scheduled to land, to find out when they expect to pick up Columbia on their radar systems. 1 minute ago, he's told. This confirms the worst for Kane. Columbia's mission is measured out to the exact second and foot on the runway where the shuttle is expected to land at Kennedy. And the fact that they have nothing on their radar is, as he puts it, quote, the absolute black and white end. Of that moment, Kane later says, quote, if the radar is looking and there's nothing coming over the horizon, the vehicle is not there. At 9:12 a.m. on this day in 2003, Kane orders the ground control officer to, quote, lock the doors, initiating contingency procedures and signifying that all hope is lost.
Why'd you say lock the doors? Copy.
The Columbia disaster marks the beginning of the end for the shuttle program, which was intended to continue beyond 2020, but comes to a close in 2011. There are 333 days left in the year.